This is the Biz News Podcast, one-on-one conversations with experts in business and personal development.
By watching this video, which runs about 29 minutes, we believe you'll get ideas on how to reduce employee turnover, improve recruitment, and stabilize your workforce. The ideas are from Clark Ingram, founder and president of People Profits, a company that deals with these problems. Clark, you have identified what you're calling the three greatest human capital problems affecting organizations. What are your three? And of those, which is consistently the worst?
Okay. Employee turnover, chronically open positions where you have vacant positions that you're not able to fill. And then lastly, skills gap. The more you have people turning over and the less people you have on board, the bigger your skills gap gets. I would say the worst one is actually employee turnover, because in my world, I believe that's step one. If you're trying to stabilize your workforce and you're trying to build the kind of workforce that everybody wants the same workforce. Okay. But the number one way, the very first step is you've got to figure out what's causing your employee turnover and find out what the root causes are, not the symptoms. For instance, I tell everybody compensation is not one of your root causes. Yeah, there may be some symptoms running off of it, but it's not one of the root causes. Almost always it's things like bad managers and things like that. But the moment you start reducing your turnover, that also helps with the recruiting, because you don't have to do as much. Now all of a sudden you're keeping the people on board. So those are the big three that I spend a lot of time on.
Clark, you say it's really hard, maybe impossible, to recruit your way out of a turnover problem. That really struck me because there are 85 gazillion online places for employers to go to look for would-be candidates. Why do you say that, and what can be done about it?
I've been doing this for 37 years. And what happened was I was a finance guy. And to this day, I still don't consider myself an HR person because there's too much HR dogma out there that I don't agree with. Okay. But every time I go into an organization and I'm talking to the CEO, whether they end up being a client or not, the number one thing that they're trying to do is they're trying to recruit their way out. They're trying to hire as quickly as they can. And they're all in that same mindset that somehow the next hire is going to fix the problem. And it never happens that way. Okay. You've got to figure out what your root causes of your turnover is. And then the problem you have is every time you hire somebody, you're throwing them into that same toxic bucket why everybody else has been leaving you. So if your turnover is in the 50% range, something like that, then what ends up happening is you've got something, and generally some things, you've got several root causes that are creating your turnover. And if you don't get rid of those root causes, you're just throwing good people into bad situations.
Well, what about the skills gap? We often hear from people who are trying to hire higher level people, whether it's into the C-suite or who have specialized abilities, that they just can't seem to find them. What do you advise in those cases?
A couple of different things. Number one, we have what's called hard to fill jobs now. And almost always it's those people, and it's every industry. Every organization out there has their list of jobs that are just hard to find those people. And here's the truth of the matter is the demand for those jobs are quite a bit higher than the supply. You've got more people, RNs. Here I am. I'm in a hospital, and RNs and docs. There you are. And then the next group for us are certified clinical people, like certified surgical techs. Okay, they're not a nurse, but they're still at a very skilled level and everything. And the issue with them, it's not a matter of just putting more job ads out and all that kind of thing, because again, the supply and demand is the gap is that gap. And so that's the number one thing is killing your skills gap, is because you literally just can't find those people. Uh, Tell me, in northern New Hampshire, I can tell you where every single dietary technician there is in northern New Hampshire. And I know where they work and et cetera, because that's one of our issues. Um, but that's the first problem that you have is, and you're not going to get those people by outbidding somebody else, because there's always going to be somebody who has more money than you do. Okay. What you've got to do is you've got to figure out what is it that they really, really want. One of the stories I tell everybody in Oklahoma, we had a situation where the Walmart could not get truck drivers, and the oil and gas industry had a whole bunch of truck drivers. The number one thing that those truck drivers wanted that they were not getting from the oil and gas industry was not money. It was the ability to be home with their families for dinner. Without a doubt, that was number one on their list. And so what happened was Walmart started looking at their operations and asked the question, how can we guarantee that these guys can be home? I don't know how much your listeners know about the oil and gas industry, but a lot of those truck drivers were spending hours sitting at the well site, waiting for the well site to need what they had in their load, and they would literally just sit in line for hours. Okay, and so here's their wife and their kids having dinner at home, and he's sitting in a truck out in the middle of nowhere. Okay. So what happened was Walmart figured out how to do their deal a little bit different, to the point where what they could do is they could guarantee that those guys could be home for dinner, where they had their route. They went from the distribution center to stores and then back and ready to go home. And they were making roughly the same kind of money, et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden, what happened was there was just a ton of those oil and gas drivers moved over to Walmart. And the oil and gas industry, my understanding, they're still hurting because of it. So when you're talking about these people that are hard to find, that have those skills you need, you better figure out something that you have that they want. And a lot of times it's not more money, it's something else. And you need to brainstorm, you need to open your mind up and try to figure that out.
Uh, Clark, you have given us a lot to think about, whether I should become an oil and gas truck driver, but I don't think they want me.
Yeah.
Very, very hard to see large objects anymore. You have written a new book talking about these problems and your solutions. Tell us the name of the book.
Well, the book is called Churn. And as everybody knows, in the C-suite and in management circles, if you're churning something, that's a bad thing. And so that's why we named it that. And it's all about the fact that, again, you're turning over. And here's the issue, Doug, is that I have 9 things that I disagree with HR. And there's different things that they believe in that I don't believe in.
Give
Okay.
us the list. Give us the list. A lot of people want to know it.
Well, I'll tell you what, let me try and pull it up here.
Clark, of those 9 lists, and I would think, based on my experience and all the hundreds, literally hundreds of executives we have talked to since 2005 doing these interviews, we all have a long or short and probably long list of what we think about HR, and probably not all of it is positive. What are your big points?
Okay. I'm just going to go down them in a row, Doug, if that's okay. Uh,
Absolutely.
Pulled up in front of me now. Number one is there's an often asked question, that is, what comes first, people or profits? And if you listen to the HR people, what they will tell you is people must come first, okay? And then you have profits after that. I happen to totally disagree with that because I think it's a false question. It's forcing you to pick one or the other, and what ends up happening is you end up having them conflicting with each other. Okay. So we're going to, when we spend some money, what are we going to spend the money on? So what I say is what you do is you make people and profits co-equals and you get them to work together. If you look at my logo, I've got the words people and profits with an infinity sign holding them together. Because what I have found in my career is if you make them co-equals, you will end up stable in the long run. You'll be stabilizing your business. You'll be stabilizing your people. You'll be stabilizing your profits, and they all work together. And you have to, that's how you do it. My second point is when I talk to HR people, a lot of times they don't focus on employee turnover. They focus on a lot of other things. And so what I say is my second point is that your first job is to cut turnover. Just like we were talking just a minute ago, we have to get control of why are people leaving. They're almost always they're leaving for bad reasons, things that we can fix. And it's our job to do that. And so again, what I always do is the very first job is figuring out what is causing our employee turnover. Secondly, like we were talking just a moment ago, is most organizations do not have a recruiting plan. I hear the phrase all the time, we hire the best people we can. Well, that's a hope. That's not a plan, and that's not a strategy. And so what I say is you have to know in detail who you are as an employer and who they are as a candidate. And what's special about you? Why would somebody want to come work for you versus work for somebody else? Especially the hard to fill jobs and even just good people. They generally have multiple opportunities in front of them at all times. Okay. And so you've got to know who you are, but you also got to know who your candidates are. So you're not just hiring another warm body. You're hiring somebody that meets your criteria. So the next thing is I see a lot of companies, what they do is they do compensation for time served. In other words, we're going to hire you. 6 months from now, we're going to do an evaluation on you, and then we're going to give you a pay raise. Okay. The problem with that is that has nothing to do with whether or not they're doing an awesome job. There's been multiple times, and we've all had this happen to us, where we hire somebody and all of a sudden we find out that they're a much better person than we thought they were. And they had a lot more skills than we thought they did, etc. Well, and you're going to wait for 6 months to give them a raise when you know they're doing a great job? That makes no sense to me. You fix that problem right then and there, and you will engage that employee the moment you do that. The other issue is a lot of times, how many times have you hired somebody and you immediately knew that they were an awful employee and they were not going to get better? And what are you going to do? You're going to wait around for 6 months to do an evaluation on them? Why? If they really are just not fitting the job, and most people have like a 90-day period, and they can get rid of them within that 90 days and all that kind of thing. And that's a very good idea. But sometimes you don't even need 90 days. A lot of times you can figure it out within 24 or 48 hours.
I think we've all known a few of those people.
Yeah. That's one of the things. That's another one of those consistencies. The other thing that I notice in the bigger companies who actually have an HR department, they're focused on activity, not results. I tell people all the time, within 6 months, I generally cut turnover by 40%, and I staff up to the mid 90s. Okay. and people just are blown away by that. But they really shouldn't be. One of the plans that I have going forward is I'm going to write 3 more books, and they're going to be workbooks, and they're literally going to take you through my process step by step. And one's going to be on turnover, one of them is going to be on recruiting, and the third one's going to be on engagement and value pathing. And the point is that doing what I do is a process. It's not luck. It's not chance. It's literally do this and you're going to get good results. You're going to get a lot better results than you've got right now. And so, but one of the things I really do see is I see HR just focus on, we're going to do this activity. We're going to do that. We're going to run this program. Well, what was the results of the program? And if the results are not good, what are you going to do about it? I'll give you a good example. In the federal government, we've been fighting poverty my entire life, and we've spent trillions of dollars on it. And we have program after program after program, and none of them are getting the results we want. So we need, somebody needs to step in and say, okay, wait a minute, let's figure out how to do this and figure out how to get the results we're looking for. My 6th thing is engagement does not happen due to an amazing culture, events, or programs. Kind of like what I was saying a moment ago. A lot of times nowadays, I see companies that they are running one program after another. They've got pizza parties, they've got taco trucks, they've got ping pong tables, and all of this kind of thing. That's not how you engage people. You engage people. And they've got a ridiculous number of studies on this, and it always comes back with the same things. Here's what engages people: shared goals and values, integrity, respect, communication, transparency, employee and growth, and the overall environment. Now, you don't have to do every single one of those perfectly, okay? But if you show that you have integrity, I tell this story all the time. I'm walking around with a CEO, and the CEO will point at somebody and say, that's one of my best employees right there. And so what I do is I tell the CEO to go get lost, and I go talk to that employee. And it's amazing how many times when I ask that guy, why do you work here? That employee will point at the CEO and say, because that man will not lie to me. He will tell me the truth, good, bad, or indifferent, and I can always count on him. And because of that, they know that, okay, even if it's bad news, that he can be involved in fixing whatever the problem is. Okay, and that's what people want. That's the kind of thing that we all want. And so, if instead of building this amazing culture, I've never seen that work ever. In 37 years, it's always been the companies that always do well do those things to the best of their ability. My 7th point is zero turnover is impossible. That's what HR says. It's impossible. Well, yes and no. Are you going to go through an entire year and never have any zero turnover? No, that's not going to happen. Okay, but let me tell you a story. We cut our turnover big time, and we were having a real trouble with our senior technicians. Again, these were the guys, hard to fill jobs, certified and a lot of stuff. Very, they were the backbone of our company. And what ended up happening was we focused on those guys, and we did a whole bunch of things to put them in a position where they had nowhere to go. If they went anywhere, they'd get a cut in pay, or they'd go somewhere that didn't have safety equipment or whatever it was. Okay, lots of different reasons. The last 5 or 6 years I was there, we did not lose a single senior technician, not one, because they again mainly because they had nowhere to go. And so here's my real gig about that is how many manufacturing plants, what is their customer return rate? What's their goal for customer returns? And the answer is 0. They want 0 customer returns. What is their goal for manufacturing defects? And the answer is zero. They want zero manufacturing defect. And you can go down a rather, zero tolerance. Think of all the different things that the average organization has zero tolerance for. I have zero tolerance for my employees physically hitting each other. If somebody starts a physical altercation, they're gone. End of conversation. And it doesn't matter who they are. My eighth point is that I see a lot of HR departments doing cookie cutter approaches. In other words, something worked at a last company they worked for, and now all of a sudden they're going to do the exact same thing in a company. That doesn't work. It doesn't work because the difference between that other company and the company they're now working for is going to be tremendous. You've got different goals, you've got different missions, you've got a different environment, you got a different demographics. And so taking something that worked from somewhere else and not and just putting it in place, chances are it's not going to work. So what you have to do is you take that same strategy and you adjust it for the new company, for that difference in vision, different in values, et cetera, et cetera. And what you end up doing is you find your way of doing that same thing, and you end up getting the answer that you want. And then last but not least is what we were talking about a little bit earlier, is hard to fill jobs. And how do you actually get that done? And what I see a lot of HR departments doing is they will put out more job ads, they'll spend more money. Like you were saying a moment ago, you got tons and tons of online recruiters, you've got recruiters out there, et cetera. And you can do that through a recruiter. You can actually be successful through a recruiter, but you're also spending an awful lot of money. Okay. Versus if you just back up and figure out, I lived in Oklahoma for a while, and there was
we did notice the New Hampshire accent.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm originally from Austin, so I got a little bit of a southern drawl, but the on this one street, basically every plumbing company in that town was on that one street, just lined up. Okay. But what was interesting about it was that you could go into two different plumbers. I knew both of these guys on a business level. One was a plumbing company for new residential construction. The other one was more of your fixing a faucet, cleaning, roto-rootering the pipe, and et cetera, et cetera. So now think about that. Two completely different guys doing that. The guy who's doing new construction is not going to want to do this, and the guy that's doing this is not going to want to do new construction. And so, again, when you bring them in, you tell them, okay, look, this is what we do. This is what makes us special. This is why we're successful at what we do. Then it's a matter of them being able to look at that. One of the things that just really bothers me, Doug, is a lot of times, not only does the company has not taken the time to figure out who they're really looking for, but on the next phase is the employee walking in the door. What does he want? He wants a job. He wants income coming into his wallet, okay? And so if that means that he has to take a job with you today and wait for that job that he really wants to come in later, he'll do that in a heartbeat. And so we need to make sure that you're telling them up front who you are. I have more than one friend who works for Exxon, and I'm one in particular. He's my age, and his one and only job for 45 years was to work for Exxon. Okay, and he graduated from Texas A&M. He went to work for Exxon, and he got promoted over the years and all that kind of thing. That's the one and only company he worked for. Now, here's the point. His name was Dave. And Dave, because of his personality, he fit in well at Exxon. My personality, I wouldn't make it at Exxon for a day. Okay. It is the largest corporate bureaucracy in the world. Okay. I just couldn't do that. It just, but that's what you want to do. You want to put them in that position where they're looking at you and asking themselves, do I see myself fitting in here? Because that's another one of my things is a lot of people talk about, well, I felt like I fit in over here, but I didn't fit in over there. That's not a chance. What you're doing, you want to give them enough information and you want to get enough information out of them to know whether or not they're going to fit in. And you should know that very quickly. Now, they can lie to you, okay, and they can tell you whatever they're going to tell you. But at the very same time, the more that you give them the idea, I would never go work for a county government. I would never go work for the federal government again, because that's just not who I am. I'm a more of an entrepreneurial kind of guy. I like fast moving stuff. I'm one of those that if I see a problem, I want to fix it, and that kind of, and that's not government people don't think like that. So that's my 9 points. And it really,
That is one full book, to say the
yeah.
least.
And well, it's not actually it's not written out like that in the book, but it's actually covered in each point is covered in the book in more detail than I was able to give just now. And just telling more stories and things and telling you more about it. There's certain those are the basic concepts I believe in. I see a lot of HR people that are very, very busy, and one of the reasons because they're on that recruiting treadmill, but they're filling up the people that are on the recruiting treadmill are people that are not fitting in, and so they end up leaving, and you're right back to where you were.
They've created a job for life for themselves, I would suspect.
Yeah,
Clark, do you have a website that our listeners and viewers can go to?
I sure do. Peopleprofits.com. And matter of fact, if you go to clarkingram.com, they'll take you to the same place. And I've got one for the book and I've got one for my speaking duties that I do.
One last question. We save this for the last because it's very open-ended. What would you like to tell our listeners and viewers that we haven't already discussed?
The main thing is there's a lot of people out there. I talk to a lot of operations people. I talk to a lot of C-suite people and people like that. They are absolutely convinced that HR doesn't help them, and that the HR world just is not connected to them. They don't feel connected, etc. And my response to that is, if done right, and if you do it like a finance guy that's been doing it for 37 years with very consistent results over the years, I've shown over and over again that it can be done in such a way that the operations people are happy with what they're doing. Okay, I'm about to go into a meeting with the COO of the hospital. Now we're good friends because I've helped her out so much. I got here, they were staffed at mid 80s. They're now staffed at mid 90s. And that's a huge, I mean, that's a huge, huge thing. On top of that, we had staffing increases of 18% over the last 2 years. And that's just because of volumes. We're doing more business. See, that's another problem issue that we really didn't get into was the whole idea that, not only have I got a problem with what I got, what the and all that, but I've also got volume increases. I've got even more volume if I could get my people right and all that. And so that's I try to get them to understand is that we HR have done the proper way. You get rid of turnover first. You figure out what's creating that. That then helps you with your recruiting and getting staffed up to a reasonable level. But then the next thing is right off the bat, think about the engagement, Doug, is the fact that now all of a sudden we went from, you know, chaos, because that's actually what some of the people say around here is that it was very chaotic when I got here, and now all of a sudden it's so stable. And now hey, we got the same people working here that was working here last week, and et cetera, et cetera. And so the main thing is it's not HR itself is not the problem. It's some of the HR dogma that HR people believe in that I reject, and by rejecting it, I get the results I've been getting for 37 years.
You've been listening to the Biz News Podcast. We welcome your input. Send your email to editor@biznews.com. That's BIZGNUS.com. Thanks for listening.